This is the Bummer Dude podcast book review of Sapiens, chapters 2, 3, and 4 of part 1, The Cognitive Revolution. My name is Frank Huerta. I'm joined by Alex Kenzie.
Hello.
And
Will you do that one more time, Frank? You broke up like 2 times.
did I really? Do I need to do anything or?
No. What you said was perfect. It's like, you know how when Zoom audio goes out.
Yes. I don't need to do anything on my audio though. It's good.
Sounds great.
Me. This is the Bummer Dude podcast book review on Sapiens, chapters 2, 3, and 4 of part 1, The Cognitive Revolution. My name is Frank Huerta. I am joined by Alex Kenzie. Previously, we had discussed chapter 1, An Animal of No Significance. Kind of wanted to recap that a little bit, but I lost my notes for it.
Really?
So, yeah, I don't know. We're right here, and now they're not. So we can begin with chapter 2. It picks up more or less where chapter 1 left off of the earliest days of humans, Homo sapiens, and sort of us commingling with other human beings, cousin species, if you will. So some 70 odd years ago, we being Homo sapiens, you and I today, left the continent of Africa to go settle in Eurasia, the Middle East, and Eastern Asia. And 45 years ago, somehow, some way, we decided to...
45,000.
What did I say? 45 years. 45,000, way longer than 45 years ago. We decided to set sail into Australia, into the outback. And that is where the significance, the everlasting footprint of human beings as we know them began to make their mark on the world. And we did that by killing off a bunch of species of animals.
Was that a
Did you hear
plane?
that?
Yeah, was that a plane?
Yeah, it was a helicopter for the hospital right down the street.
Oh, okay.
Yep. So we get into Australia, and well, hold on. Before we get there, there was the discussion of how Homo sapiens prevailed over other human species. And the book makes the case for language being the catalyst for our advancement and our growth. But more than language, it was gossip.
Yes.
And it was the ability to talk about other sapiens. Because it gives the example that a eagle can let out a certain squeal that lets people know a lion is in the area, or lets other eagles know a lion is in the area. And a monkey is smart enough to know that if they hear that sound, then a lion's in the area, and they have to make some move to get away from that. So language isn't a specific sapien trademark, but the ability to theorize and fictionalize things so that we understand them as stories and fiction, myths, religion, pagan religions, myths about, why we do what we do, who we worship, why we worship the sun, why we worship the moon, why we sacrifice babies on an altar, why we do anything, is more or less a myth, fiction made up. And it is that advancement of a sapien that allowed us to outlast any other humans, plus rise to the top of the hierarchy of beings.
Yeah, and I really liked, or found it interesting when it was talking about like group size affected this a lot. It said it around 150 people is like what the typical group, I guess you would say, kind of moved in, or like where they found that the gossip was effective, because like most of those people would be able to know each other at least in some way, like have some kind of relationship with each other.
Right.
That was like the most like commonly found like group, and like how, I don't know what I'm trying to say here.
I think the point was that it was 150 people that you could have an intimate relationship with.
Yes.
And then once you begin to spill over 150, then your relationships begin to, you're not capable of holding that many people in close regard in your head, right? So I think it gave the example of hierarchical institutions or structures that are necessary when you're dealing with something that's more than 150 people, because you need to categorize it. You need to make sense of it somehow. So you compartmentalize it into, an LLC that has an HR group and a an accounting group and a sales group and a marketing group. You can understand those groups, and you might even know the heads of each one of them, but you're going to have a hard time having a relationship with,
right,
some junior inside sales guy or that team or whatever. So it made the case that if you're in a tribe and you're scurrying and scavenging for food or whatever, there's no real need for a hierarchical structure, right? You could exist in a commune.
Yep.
Easier. And they even made the case that communes versus a nuclear family were more or less the norm way back when, because you would have less than 150 people in your society. You're always moving. You're never really stationary. You got to contend with the weather. And so
think about like if you had to, from month to month, week to week, whatever, like move because your food source was out, or the weather, the next few months we know there's going to be snow, that we're going to walk a couple 100 miles or whatever the hell or go to this cave and live there for the next 4 months. It's
wow. And contend with a bunch of things that could kill you.
Yeah.
Right. And
I didn't realize there were saber-toothed tigers in America until I read that's more in chapter 4, but like I never
hordes of them.
Yeah.
Hordes of them. So that's a good segue, because chapter 2 more or less was the presentation of a sapien as a gossiper, and that's really what allowed us to formulate the ability to create myths and legends and things like that. There was a theory presented that because earlier sapiens had to know how to do a lot of things, that perhaps they were cognitively more advanced than present day humans. Whereas like you or I, like you'll be an expert in audio engineering, but you couldn't tell me the first thing about how to build a gas station, and and vice versa, right? And I don't know how to grow lettuce, and I don't know how to make a computer, but we take these things for granted because everyone else has that shared knowledge where if somebody wanted to pursue that, they could. But back in the day, you had to know how to do everything.
Yeah. They said that their senses were heightened, and that possibly at that time that was the like most aware, or like not necessarily the smartest, because it's different. Like when you look at it from today, like they couldn't operate a cell phone, but like they were the most aware and like knew how to do exactly like how they would hunt and flint and instantly turn it into an arrowhead. and be aware of like, oh, I hear these very like quiet footsteps 400
Mhm.
meters, whatever away.
In
Um,
tune with how a branch breaks
yeah,
versus how another leaf cracks on the ground.
and to think, I mean, I guess we we get dumber every day with all the social media and all that stuff, but to think that like we were smarter 60,000 years ago as
It makes
well.
sense. It
Yeah.
makes sense. It makes sense because, like, yeah, we're dumber, dude. We take in so much information that we're all so stupid.
Mhm.
And back in the day, you know, it's not like they didn't take in a lot of information, but it was out of necessity. It wasn't so, you could theorize about this, that, and the other. It was, I need to know how to do this to survive.
Mhm.
Um, and they had the ability to do that. When we decided to make a trek over to um, Australia, um, we hold on. I'm getting my chapters mixed up. I want to keep this a little bit concise because I really want it to match with the chapters.
Yeah,
Um,
I can edit it. You're good.
well, no, that's fine. But still in chapter 3 now, there was the commune theory that there wasn't a nuclear family, um, and they even made the case that a nuclear family is incompatible in our DNA. And I
Yeah,
know a lot of people will make that case today as well. Um,
really interesting idea.
yeah, I mean, just because that's the way we lived way back when. I mean, I don't know how long does it take for somebody to evolve into that, right? Because if you're saying that a commune is a better approach for, hold on, can we pause this?
Yeah.
Can you hear that in the background? My brother's cooking.
Oh.
Hey Joe,
Hey, bud.
what you making? Cooking? Are you be cooking for a little bit? Okay. Well,
There's no door.
is that like really really loud?
It's not that big of a deal.
But like you can hear it.
Yeah, seems like it just got quieter.
Okay. Anyway, um, so if you could make the case that a commune was a better idea back in the day because you had less people in your group, I think you could make the case that today a nuclear family is a better route because we're not a commune per se, right? We don't need to sleep around with a bunch of people to spread our seed to, extend our survival. That isn't necessarily right now. So I guess you could make the case that we've evolved into a nuclear family, but the book made the case that's like specifically like not in our DNA.
Right, right. Which could make sense because it probably takes longer for that to like get out of your DNA. But like, yeah, these days, like back then, when your group size was 150 or less, like you could probably do that. And they even said that like a female would have multiple partners, but then when she would get pregnant, they wouldn't know who the dad was, so they just like as a group
Mm-hmm.
fought children, which is like
Right.
really, but like today, that's not possible. Like, how would you really do that day
Yeah.
to
Try swinging one that by your wife. See what she
day?
says. Hey, I got an idea. This isn't in my DNA.
So
Um,
in time, it might change, but I could definitely see that. And it's like even when you're married, like as faithful and loving as you are, like a guy still just is gonna like maybe look at a girl or whatever and be like, oh damn, like she looks good or whatever. Like that's in your DNA to I guess like be curious or like observant of that.
bi-curious.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Uh,
um,
they,
but like you're saying that now these days the nuclear family that like seems to make the most sense for survival.
yeah, I think so, right? Like, because what's the most important thing for like the advancement of your offspring? And I think that would be that they are able to, you know, be brought up to do as many things as possible and be as, have every opportunity to learn as much as they could. And yeah, I mean, I think the best vessel for that would be a nuclear family. So I don't know. I mean, that's a strong thing to say that, it may not be in our DNA. But also, we should point out that a lot of this up until this point has been all theory. And the author even says that there was no certainty with the forager history, back 70,000 years ago. But they did mention, how the foragers probably ate better than the peasants that came later, 60,000, 65,000 years after, where, they were happy to eat rice. If you're like a Chinese peasant, like way back in the day, you were happy to eat rice for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and do it again the next day because you didn't have any other options. Where these guys might, eat 15 different things in a day and, another 12 different things the next, which I thought was pretty cool.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, that makes sense. If I think of like Black Plague, medieval times, like, yeah,
Sure.
those people are probably eating like bread and like frogs or like whatever the hell they could find, some small little rodent.
Sure.
And like foragers are eating wild onions and berries and nuts.
Yeah, no, it kind of sounds cool actually.
Yeah.
The last point that I took from that chapter was that they tried to examine just how violent these ancient ancestors were.
Mhm.
And I forget the number of skulls that they found that could have been a product of violence, but they said it was about 5%. And I think he said in the 20th century, which saw, the likes of Hitler, Lenin, and Mao, and Stalin, and countless other genocides. I think violent death was only like 4% of the death.
Pretty
But
well.
back then, calculating what they were able to find in fossilized skeletons, that percentage may have been closer to 5%. And so interesting to think about. But that was only in one area, the Danube Valley. And then
Yeah. There's a whole other area that was completely different that they found.
Correct.
No
balance. So then it gets into some really, really interesting stuff when the book talks about the amount of animals that sapiens have made extinct. Here's some of the animals that used to exist in the world and now don't. 450-pound kangaroos, marsupial lions, which were the largest land predator in Australia, flightless birds 2 times the size of an ostrich, 2.5-ton wombat, just to name a few. So the book made the case that, and I still think, we're theorizing a little bit based off of the limited evidence that we were able to extract out of fossilized skeletons that we were able to find, but about 90% of the megafauna in Australia went extinct exactly around the time when we would have crossed the ocean into Australia and began to inhabit it. And it made the same case for North and South America with woolly mammoths and saber-toothed tigers and I guess North American camels, North American horses, all going extinct when sapiens began to explore their land. And the book is now starting to get a little bit more sure of themselves. The author is getting a little bit more sure of himself about this is really not up for dispute. And this was caused by sapiens. There's theories that could point to climate change, right? And not climate change the way that you and I know it today, but climate change like ice ages.
Yep.
You know, the it's a mastodon, big
Mhm.
giant flying bird. I guess that thing survived two ice ages and or two cycles of one ice age and only went extinct around the time of human beings, sapiens invading their land. So,
Yeah.
I mean, that's a big eye opener, right? Like, I know we think about what we do today and we're cognizant of the damage that we are doing to the living animals that we know of right now. But it looks like we've been doing some damage for a long time.
Now, was that? I was kind of curious. Was that more, a lot of it, like through hunting, or based on we come in, we destroy their habitat, they can no longer live, they die?
Yeah, it's a chain reaction, right? Um, because we are able to consume such a vast quantity of different things
Mhm.
to sustain us, then any major intrusion inside of a food chain is going to disrupt other parts of that food chain.
Right.
And so, yeah, I mean, it was hard to give real specific examples of what the reasoning was for that, but it was more like we can disprove other theories better than we can disprove the theory that it was the presence of sapiens, right? Like you can't use climate change to explain most of it.
Right.
And for these reasons, and the words indisputable were used. The author said it's indisputable what our effect has had on these animals.
Yeah, on the world, man. On, huge rainforests and huge lush areas of vegetation, and I mean, I'm
Yeah,
sure
but I think that like in the context of this, that's like a little flea. I think that's a little tick on a dog compared to like the craziness of our presence. I mean, and even like back then what were we doing? We were just living. We were just existing, surviving,
yeah,
trying to exist. We weren't producing things and extracting carbon from underground and putting it back above ground, and we were doing half of that stuff. So yeah, man, it was a big eye opener. If you can subscribe to that theory, and the author seems to be very sure that there's not a better one to describe, you know, the loss of existence of so many different species of animal.
right.
But to be fair, I don't think we need like woolly mammoths or saber-tooth tigers running around. Sorry, you guys are gone, but like, are
Yeah,
we better off for it? I don't know. Probably.
yeah,
Probably. I mean, it's like us or them, right?
yeah. I mean, at a
You
point,
know,
yeah.
at the end of the day, it sucks. But at the end of the
But
day, it's us or them.
right, right. It's crazy to think then, like, 40,000 years later or whatever, when we come over and we invade, and like people are here already, like that got redone to them, like the same things that like their ancestors did to the planet and animals and everything.
Or are you talking about like Spanish conquest and all that? And
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Came full circle in a way, in a weird way, where we're
Guess,
like invading ourselves.
yeah, I guess it kind of did, huh?
Yeah.
So
I thought it was cool. I learned, I never knew this. There is an ice age on average, about every 100,000 years.
yeah,
I'm just so curious. Like, obviously, we won't be around for it, but like, like, if humans are around in the next 80,000 years or whatever it's been, how do we combat that? Like, what do we design to stop, like, actual climate change? Have we actually just sped it up with all the shit we've done? Like,
it's it's almost like it's almost impossible to have any significant impact on the climate when you try to do so purposefully, right? There was a study done in Europe that involved a bunch of Nobel laureates, and they basically took like the problems of the world, right? Child hunger in Africa, viral diseases in other parts of the world, climate change, poverty, violence, genocide, wars, this, that, and the other. They take all these problems and they built a scale to determine what the significance of $1 is in the amount of good that they could do for a single problem, right? And at the top of the list was things like child hunger in Africa or child hunger anywhere in the world. That is a relatively inexpensive problem to fix. So $1 of good might contribute $1 might contribute $50 of good, right? Climate change was like way down the list. And they determined that if you took all of the resources that we could, diverted them from these other problems, and said in 100 years, the problem will be so that we are extinct. So we need to put every resource we have into this problem for 100 years. And their model came back and said that there was like a 1% chance that you could even get like 2-degree difference in overall climate change. Yeah.
Years of focused efforts.
Yeah. And it's just because there's so many variables. There's so much that you can't control when it comes to actual climate.
Yeah.
That like you can make the case that over however many years we've been doing it, right? Like at least over 100, 150, we've been extracting carbon from underneath the earth and then burning it and expelling it into the atmosphere. You can make the case that over that period of time, that has done significant damage, right? But the counter argument cannot be made. You can't put that back into a bottle. You can't just say, well, we've been focusing our efforts on polluting the air. Let's now focus our efforts on trying to reverse that. And the answer is no, you can't. Yeah. Like it's almost impossible. So yeah, man, it's interesting because it's like we're kind of hurling forward with really no idea about climate and what it's going to do, how it's going to affect us, and if we even can do anything about it.
Do you think we'd be expediting an ice age potentially, or
I don't know. Yeah. That was the fear back in like the 70s. Yeah. They were afraid that there was going to be global cooling. I get that was like the big thing back in the 70s, global cooling. Yeah, interesting, right? But anyway, that was basically the book, or the 3 chapters that we read. Chapters 2, 3, and 4 for Sapiens, and that is part 1. And part 1 is titled The Cognitive Revolution. We will begin part 2, the agricultural revolution, which includes the next 4 chapters: history's biggest fraud, building pyramids, memory overload, and there is no justice in history. Thanks for joining us. I appreciate it. We'll see you next time.
Bye.